What's up, friends? Thank you, as always, for joining us bright and early here in Tarrytown, New York, just past 6 a.m., but on the other side of the world in Thailand. 5 p.m. is it now? You told me, Jack Kruger?
5 p.m.
5 p.m. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. This is Jack Kruger, a new friend of the show. Been following his tweets for a long time. All of his links are in the bio. Give him a follow. This man is sending out insightful knowledge about not just baseball, but about life on the regular. So do him a favor and support him. He supports us, so support him, please. So Jack Kruger, my man, first question for you, because we're going to get into all the baseball stuff. We're going to get into all the business stuff, but you had an awesome tweet yesterday about learning to dance and how it helped you with your fear of rejection. Can we just get like a quick follow up on this?
Yeah, so in high school, I didn't really dance at all. In fact, I was terrified of doing it. But there was a country bar that allowed high schoolers, and I went with some friends, and there was a cute girl who pulled me out onto the floor, and I didn't know what I was doing, and she was, teaching me to dance. And I realized a light bulb went off in my head. This is a great way to meet girls. So I actually moved to Arizona a few years later, and there were some country bars nearby. And I was like, I'm going to learn to dance. And I told my sister, actually, I said, I am going to learn to dance and I'm going to meet my wife dancing. That's how it's going to happen. So I went dancing with a couple friends, and I met some people, met some friends, and I really have been dancing since then. It's probably been 5-6 years. I met my wife through that friend group, and I met her dancing, and we've been married for 2 years now. And dancing is really something that, for me, changed really the trajectory of other facets of life that I didn't think it would touch at all. And you talked about it. It was in the tweet that I sent, which was that fear of rejection. And what happens when you learn to dance is that you suck at dancing. And so nobody really wants to dance with you. And you're terrified of asking people because you know they're going to say no to you. And yet at the same time, that's how you have to do it. You have to get those no's. And eventually you realize that the no doesn't really mean anything. They say no and you move on to the next one. And a lot of times what happens is they say no, you ask the girl next to them, and she says yes, and then you come back, and the one who said no originally now wants to dance with you because you had the confidence to ask the next girl even after the first one said no. And that fear of rejection, getting over that, was huge for me, not only in the baseball world, but also when I was pivoting and starting to do stuff in the business world. That fear of rejection, I wasn't afraid to make cold calls. I wasn't afraid to DM people that I had no business talking to, simply because it didn't matter that I was getting no's from them or getting ignored from them. And some of those DMs and those cold messages really launched my career in other places that probably wouldn't have been there if I hadn't been comfortable, getting those no's. And that really came from dancing.
You saw a whole different world playing minor league baseball for as long as you did. You said at one point you were making little to no money, sharing a 2-bedroom with 7 guys. Okay, I imagine you had to dig deep in more ways than just baseball. What are the type of things you learn about yourself sharing a 2-bedroom with 7 guys sleeping on an air mattress?
The first is that is a memory to be cherished. I think when people read that, they say minor leaguers aren't paid enough. They think, wow, that must have been terrible. It really wasn't bad in the moment, though. We were young dudes. We didn't mind it being really dirty or, really crowded. Of course, we would have preferred something nicer, but we had a dream and we wanted to pursue that dream. And we were willing to do anything that we had to do to go after that dream and get the goal, right? And so it really wasn't that big of a deal. Now, I will say that process as a whole, if it taught me one thing, it's that preparation breeds confidence. When you are in a system like professional baseball, and this is true of lots of different other systems and institutions and businesses, but when you're in a ruthless business like that, there's not a lot that you can control. And the one thing that you can control is preparation. And what you learn is that it doesn't matter how many people don't believe in you. It doesn't matter what the statistics say. It doesn't matter what your family or friends might say. Your preparation is what will breed your confidence. I think the best example of this would be Alex Honnold. If you've seen the movie Free Solo, he prepared that climb over and over and over and over until the moves didn't feel scary anymore. That's a direct quote from him. And I think that message, as I look back in hindsight at my career, is a great phrase to represent what I experience in my own personal career, which is preparation breeds confidence. If you want to feel good about the moves you're making amidst a lot of doubt and unbelief, preparation is the best way to go.
Yeah, that really well said. I think that applies to so many things. But speaking of that, you talk a lot about how current athletes should always be preparing, for like their careers afterwards. What exactly is it like you would say to these minor leaguers right now and even professional players?
So anybody that is in professional sports at any level, and I will say that even as minor leaguers, you're still getting paid to play. This is what they're doing full time. They're still professionals, right? They're just not in the major league. So anybody that's in professional sports, and this applies to anything else where you're doing something interesting, but you have a platform, you have something that people want to hear about. Because even if you're only making a few $1,000s a month, there's very few people who have that experience in life, and there's very few people who get to do what those guys get to do. And so that gives you an advantage when you are reaching out to people, when you want to connect with high value people to make those connections, network with people. I hate that term, but it's the one that people understand the best. When you want to network with people, there's really two things that you can offer to someone to get them to respond to your message. The first is value. And if you are a professional athlete and you don't have any experience in business, and the person that you're trying to connect with is involved in business, you don't have a lot of value to provide to them in that way. And that leads to the second thing that you can offer them, which is something interesting, something that they don't get to see on a daily basis that makes them go, you know what, this is going to be a different conversation than the other 7 calls that I have today. How can I get to know this person who I know nothing about, but they're doing something interesting? And that is something that you lose when you leave professional sports. The message that when you send someone, you can say, hey, I'm a current athlete versus I'm a former athlete. There's lots of former athletes. There's not as many current athletes. So I did this. Luckily, I wish I had started sooner, but I did it for the last couple of years of my career. I recommend everybody who's in professional sports to do it. It is the single greatest thing that you can do while you're still playing.
Yeah, agreed. Well said. So let's shift gears now because we witnessed something not too long ago, right around the start or right before the start of the MLB season that I wanted your thoughts on. I thought the World Baseball Classic was better than it's ever been and more eye-opening than it's ever been to not just baseball fans, but fans of all sports, just because of one of the things you and I spoke about before the show. It felt like this was a bigger world of baseball. And you say obviously because it's the World Baseball Classic, but it hasn't felt that way in the past. There was a big shift in how we viewed it, how it was talked about, and that final at bat that seemed to like be the talking point of the sports world for a good 24 to 48 hour period after it happened. What was your takeaway as a consumer of the baseball business of the World Baseball Classic this year?
I really think it was one of the best things that happened to baseball really in the last decade. And this was fueled, of course, the World Baseball Classic as a whole has been a cool event, over the years, but it never had the hype and excitement that it had this year. I think we have to give a ton of credit. And at this point, I just feel like a fanboy, but it's the truth. We have to give a ton of credit to Shohei Ohtani because he is a global superstar within baseball. And when you look at the game of baseball, there are not that many global superstars. When you look at other sports like soccer, we were talking about soccer before we started recording. Soccer has global superstars, players like Cristiano Ronaldo, Messi. Those players are known throughout the whole world. But even guys like Mike Trout, who's an amazing guy, amazing player, is not necessarily globally known, even though he's recognized as the best player in baseball for the last probably 3 to 5 years. Shohei Ohtani was able to bridge that gap, and him being from Japan, coming over to the United States, being worshipped in both of those places and performing at the level that he did in the World Baseball Classic was absolutely exceptional. It was so good for the game of baseball, and baseball has a lot of momentum right now, and Major League has to do everything that it can to continue this momentum and grow the sport.
Yeah, I mean, I agree because the funniest part about guys like Mike Trout, and I'll use Jacob deGrom as an example. I think for the past 5 years, Jacob deGrom has been the best athlete in New York. However, he could have walked into 7 out of 10 living rooms in the New York tri-state area and nobody would have known who he is because he's just as big of a player and as big of a name he was. he's not a guy you recognize. Like, people don't know baseball stars these days. So to me, this was great. I absolutely love what Shohei Ohtani is doing. I think it's historic. But speaking of those Mets, your perspective on this I have to ask about the Mets, being a New York-based show, being a big Mets fan. Your perspective on what you think the Mets can do this year. Do we overcome the loss of DeGrom? Is Verlander past his prime? Is he washed? Can Scherzer regain form? Your thoughts on the Mets' outlook for this year?
So first of all, never doubt Scherzer or Verlander. Both those guys are ridiculously good, and it doesn't matter how old they are. They're both vicious competitors, and the Mets are looking really, really good. Got to give credit to the owner, right? Went out, spent a bunch of money, and gave the Mets a real contender against the Yankees, who have, let's call a spade, really been the team in the last however long, right? So it's really cool to see what's going on in New York, both sides. And I think that the Mets have as good a chance as they've had in a while. And I'm excited to see what happens, but I wouldn't doubt Scherzer or Verlander. Don't worry about them being past their prime. They're both ridiculously good pitchers, and I'd expect both of them to have a good season.
Yeah. Listen, when you have an owner who comes out and says he's not going to play second fiddle to the New York Yankees, anything's possible. And that's exactly what's happening right now. But last thing before we get out of here, like I said, I follow your tweets. Anyone listening, make sure you go follow him on Twitter as well. One of your tweets that stuck out to me the other day, you talked about how one of the things you want to get into is in MMA. And I don't know if you realize it or not, but you're actually in a hotbed for MMA. You're in Thailand at the moment. There is a very prominent gym called Tiger MMA, probably not too far from where you are right now. But what sparks your curiosity about MMA? What makes you want to get into it more?
So last night we actually went to a fight. There was a Muay Thai fight just about 10 minutes from us, and a guy got KO'd. It was great. So we had a great time last night. No, my dad actually has a black belt in Krav Maga, and so my dad had been training for a long time. I never got into martial arts solely because I was focused on baseball and I didn't want to get hurt. And I really didn't have that much interest in it growing up. And then once I did get to the point where I had a lot of interest in it, then it was a little bit too late, because now I'm in collegiate baseball, professional baseball. Now I really can't get hurt. So I kind of started that a little bit later. No, I love martial arts for probably a lot of the same reasons that you or anyone else does. I love that it's great physical exercise, but I think that there's a subtle confidence that comes with being able to handle yourself, being able to defend your family, which is the original reason that my dad got into Krav Maga, being able to handle yourself in any situation. I think there's a lot of good intangible things that come from it, resilience, humility. I think that those are all really important things that people can get from MMA. And I am absolutely psyched to get into it. I've done a little bit of unofficial training with my dad in the backyard, but other than that, I haven't had any real training, and I'm psyched to get humiliated by people who know a lot more than I do. I'm really excited for it. I got a couple buddies who are going to go in on it with me, so I'm really pumped. I think it's going to be
fun. Good for you. I love it. One of the things, we'll close by saying this. One of the things I just always loved about MMA is what made my eyes open about the sport of MMA was the understanding that losing a fight is not like losing a basketball game or a baseball game. And the sense of urgency and the fear and the bravery that it takes to step into the octagon is a lot different than what you have to do in other sports. And that understanding for me changed my view of the sport. And that's why I always say MMA is one of the most beautiful sports that we have on this earth. But my man, Jack Kruger,
totally agree.
Appreciate you doing this. This was awesome. I hope we could do it again soon. I love hearing your insight on baseball, on life and sports and everything. I want to hear more stories down the road about some of those minor league days as well. My man, appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Henry, thanks so much for having me.